Welcome to the Wild Pitch Podcast.
All right, guys, welcome back. Wild Pitch Podcast once again, and we're very lucky enough to have what we call a baseball lifer. We've had a couple of them recently, and I think this guy, man, the resume is just insane, and again, gives a lot of insight to everybody that is looking forward with his parents or kids or just looking for some fun stories. But today we have Darren Fenster. He is the base running and outfield coordinator of the Boston Red Sox. So, you know, for me, we were just talking off air, but I actually knew pretty much, I followed Darren's career pretty closely from just recognizing him as a guy like myself, as being an undersized middle infielder. So I always kept tabs of his career. And, he's really been an overachiever in many ways. And we're also lucky enough to have Mike Gaffney with us again. It's not really a guest host anymore. He's just part of the show. So, Mike, I think
nothing else to do.
Yeah, that's it. That seems to be the theme. That's why we're ripping these out, podcast after podcast. And Mike, I want you to just introduce Darren. You have the closest relationship with him, having been under maybe playing a couple levels below him with the Royals at the time. So I know he's somebody you looked up to. So we'll take it away, Mike.
Yeah. So for the audience, Jimmy, Chris, and Brian asked me to, just grab a couple of guests that are still in baseball, that I do have a relationship with that maybe they didn't maybe think of getting on or couldn't get on. So I reached out to Darren. He was the first guy I reached out to for a number of reasons. One, since this is a New York area show, New York, New Jersey, Northeast, Darren is a local guy. He grew up in New Jersey. The other reason is, like, to Jimmy's point, he was someone where if you look at his story, you say overachiever, but when you're around him, you don't think that. So I was lucky enough when I got drafted by Kansas City. He was with the organization for a few years. And for whatever reason, Darren, you probably remember this, every spring training, my locker was near you, maybe with the F and the G, whatever it was. And I think when he saw, the middle infielder from New York, he kind of knew what I was up against also. So he kind of took me under his wing a little bit. We ran in the same circle, but I just remember, and now looking back, it's easier. And I wish I realized at the time, being around him. And I spoke about this on the show a while ago when I was a guest, that when I got to the minor leagues, I kind of lost that bite to me, because I always fought for everything I had so motivated, always thought I'm better than this guy, I'm better than that guy. I don't care if he plays for Florida State, I'm better than him. And when I got to the minor leagues, I saw, wow, these guys are pretty good. I just want to get to AA and I'll be happy with it. But Darren was the first guy I was around in the minor leagues. And I don't know if he wants his players knowing this now, that had no problem questioning whatever authority, and maybe that's why he's still in the game and so successful. But and I remember Darren, and you'll go into this a little further, but I think it was, you were going back to Wilmington for your third year or whatever it was.
13.
Yeah. and you were just so pissed off. I think he gave one of the coaches business, and I just thought I was like, wow, man, that took some balls to do that. But what does he do? He then backs it up, and I think you hit 400 for like the first 2 months in the Carolina League, where it's not easy to hit, and you get promoted. You end up earning a big league invite, and then you had the unfortunate injury. But I just remember that, and when I look back, I'm like, man, I wish I had a little more Fenster in me. It was almost like an adjective, like an adjective for me. And I don't know. He's just a guy that I'm not shocked at seeing all the success now. But then when I got into coaching 7 years ago, I'm reading the ABCA or whatever magazine. I read this article by Coach Your Kids, and I was like, wow, that was a great article. And then I read Coach Your Kids as Darren Fenster. I was like, holy crap, nothing surprised me. And now in our days of us being ex-pro guys and playing at a high level, and you see all this stuff going on social media, there's a lot of stuff you disagree with that you roll your eyes at. Every time Darren posts something, I could actually say it's 100% approval rate from what I see. So I also know that Darren's a really cool guy, and I know that we could let our guard down a little bit here and rap a little bit. So I wanted to get him on and let him tell his story.
Well, I appreciate that, Mike, and I appreciate you keeping the memories clean, because I'm sure there's stuff that's probably not suitable for air. But Yeah, it's funny that, the things that you remember, and I don't, still to this day, I don't remember what might have happened or what might have been said when when I got assigned back to Wilmington, for that third year. And you know uh, you know you said that it's not surprising that I'm doing what I'm doing, because of that, or maybe it's because in spite of that. Who knows? But yeah, like, once you get away from your career and you get some perspective and you understand sometimes why things happen the way that they do once you get out of it. I mean, whether it be, being upset about going back to A-ball for a third year or getting released or whatever, I think you realize that, number one, things happen for a reason. And number two, like in those times of adversity or when things don't go your way, you learn how much you grow from them. And, I do remember that third year in Wilmington when I'm like, I think everybody who, isn't on the streamline straight to the big leagues hits this point where they think, man, what the hell am I doing? I'm making 50 cents an hour, whatever it is. And, I think I was 24, 25 at the time. You don't have a pot to piss in, and you're not even getting at bats in A-ball for your third year. It's like, that's when things first started jumping in my head about like, hey, maybe it's, I'm getting close to the end of the rope. And so Billy Gardner Jr. was our manager. And I remember we opened the year in Myrtle Beach, and I didn't play for at least the first 2 games and maybe even the first 3 games. I want to say like Mike Aviles was our shortstop. Ruben Gotay was our second baseman, like a handful of like future big league. Yeah. And then, I might've gotten in, as, the courtesy, the Sunday day game to give the prospect a day off at short. And, I might've gotten a couple hits, and then gave the prospect at second a day off the following day on a travel day. And then got a couple hits. And then the next thing I know, I started that year offensively, unlike any that I ever had, to the point where I became an everyday player, but an everyday utility player. And it just kind of helped me refocus in the sense of taking advantage whatever opportunity that I might have had. And so I'm working throughout that year. And I don't know if you ever heard this, but I'm leading the Carolina League at hitting at the All-Star break, and I'm just waiting to get called up. It's like, all right, I'm in my third year. I'm leading the league. I'm older than some of the freaking coaches at this point in that damn league. And like I don't get called up. I'm like, all right, well, maybe they'll let me play in the All-Star game and then I'll go. So I played in the All-Star game, don't get called up. And then the farm director came into town, and I sat down with him, and like, apparently, like, to your point, I didn't have any problems about, questioning what was going on with my career. And I distinctly remember him saying that, you're having a great year and you've opened a lot of eyes, but, we want you to stay here and help this group win a Carolina League ring. And so this is
music to your ears, right?
This is like early July. And so I start the game that night, and I'm like, completely screwed with my own mind. And I'm like, dude, like, yeah, that's all good and fun, but my career goal is not to win a Carolina League ring. So in like the second or third inning of the game, I pulled myself out of the game. And I told Billy I couldn't play, and I started packing up all my shit. Like I was ready to retire. Like I literally pulled myself out of the game. And, after the game, Billy said, hey man, like, look, I have nothing, I can't disagree with anything that you said, but, there are 29 other teams right now who, know that you're having the year that you're kind of having. So come on the road with us. I'm not going to play you for the next couple of days. I want you to think about this before you make any decisions. And then, because he almost made me starting to play for 29 other teams. He changed my perspective. I'm like, all right, I'm having a best year of my career. And so as it would turn out, maybe a week or two later, Tony Graffinino got hurt in the big leagues, and then someone got called up from AA, and then I went up to AA, and then I just kept going through the whole year. And then the way that I finished that year in AA, I got an invite to big league camp. And, it was just funny how that worked out, going from the start of that spring training when I was ready to quit then to, literally packing my bag up in the middle of the year to being in big league camp a year later. And then, unfortunately, suffering an injury, which hindsight 2020 with some perspective is the start of a coaching career, which has allowed me to continue this life in the game.
And Penny, and as you're telling that story, I definitely remember, but I also remember you getting back to your locker in spring training after they told you, and you said, well, Gaff, that's a wrap. I'm done. And you started packing stuff up in your locker then too.
Oh man. Yeah, maybe some things I just block out. Like it's like when I get thrown out of a game as a manager, I hit a point where I just snap and I'll get back in and be like, what the hell did you say to him? Like, I have no idea. So maybe that's one of those instances.
So listen, you got that good New York, I'm sorry, not New York, but the Northeast mentality. And that's that I think guys like that went a long way in their pro careers because they had that mentality.
Yeah. I mean, you got a chip on your shoulder and like, truth be told, my mom grew up in Merrick. So,
okay. There you go.
Right.
Maybe I got some Long Island in me after all, who knows?
I know the Jersey kids are very proud of New Jersey.
Yeah.
It's like seems to be a thing. So, but talk about like, I want to get into a lot of things, but the coaching your kids, how that came about and what you're doing with it.
So that came about in 2013. I had been on Twitter for maybe a year, hardly ever posted anything. And I just started to see, the age of the, whatever you want to call it, the Twitter coach, the hitting guru, the pitching guru. And there was a lot of guys who like I enjoyed following and they gave some really good information. But then I started realizing a lot of these guys were basically trying to build a brand and they were trying to, stick out as the smartest guy in the room. And they were trying to have, they had the secret to hitting. They had the secret to, throwing 95 miles an hour and, this is how you're going to get to the big leagues. This is how you're going to get a college scholarship. And as I'm reading this stuff, I'm like, all right, well, that's one way. And then like you try to have, a challenging type of conversation and you just get completely shit on. And like your experience, they throw it out the window. So at that point I had done what I did, in college. I had played professionally. I had coached in college. I was a recruiting coordinator. I had been a hitting coach in A-ball. I was now a professional manager. And I have like these guys who were just like debunking everything that I said. And what really bugged me about it was not that they were shitting on me, but more the sense of like creating a narrative that was limiting people's hopes in the sense that if it was a pitcher, everything was geared towards the next level, saying, hey, if you don't do what I'm telling you, you will never throw 95 miles an hour. And if you don't throw 95 miles an hour, you will never play in professional baseball or Division I. I'm like, that couldn't be further from the truth. And so similar, like, when it came to like the hitting, if you can't hit the ball over the fence, you will never play in professional baseball and all this stuff. And so what really spurned this whole thing was imagining kids reading this stuff. And these were people who had like just, significant followings at the time. And imagining kids reading that and getting so discouraged because, hey, if a pitcher tops out, like his ceiling is 85 miles an hour and he's reading this, well, he might be in high school and say, well, man, this sucks. I can't play anywhere. And so what I wanted to do was, just to not debunk something that might've been true, but to just open up people's eyes in the sense that there's a lot of ways you can be really good and really successful in this game. And I think growing, sharing my experiences from all the different roles that I've had helped me grow like just a very organic following in the sense of, I'm never selling anything and I'm just sharing experiences that I believe can help players, help coaches, and just help better understand the game. And, over the course of, I guess, 8 years at this point of having it, I think people appreciate, the non-abrasive, just, straightforward approach that I've taken. And, I think my passion for the game kind of shines through and allows me to show, teach things in a very simplistic manner that, a future major leaguer could read as easily as, a kid who might be 13 years old.
Yeah, I think your content's unbelievable. I follow you. And I mean, I always say that it's like touching a hot stove when you put something out there and you start getting that feedback from people and you get scared off quick. I mean, no matter what, you're always going to get that, right? With anything you put out.
So what you learn, and I learned this very early on, was there are guys that you could have, a civil disagreement with. And it's not even, it's just a discussion, right? That's what a discussion is. Like you go back and forth. And there are people who, at the slightest time of challenging, they unleash their
Fury.
their fury on it. And it's just like, I started early on, like trying to go back and forth. And then I quickly realized that, you're never going to win the battle. And then, I kept following these guys, but then I realized, man, like these guys just pissed me off. And then, a buddy of mine was like, he has like an annual Twitter cleanse, and he just removes people who he found himself following, who he just like, that pissed him off. And he's like, how am I letting these people who I will never meet, like get under my skin? And I knew exactly what he was talking about. So I started doing that. And it's, it's very metaphorical, because the same thing holds true in real life. Like, why are you hanging around these people that just constantly bring drama to your life or that piss you off? It's like, I guess it's a lot easier on Twitter to just hit the unfollow button than it is to like kick someone out of your life entirely. But
those people love when they get unfollowed, right? They take pride in it.
Yeah, they take snapshots.
They take pride in when they get blocked. I don't think they realize when they get unfollowed.
Oh, when they get blocked, yeah.
Yeah, it's a different scene, man. And I've learned how to navigate it in a way that I could stay positive and not piss myself off or piss some other people off.
Have you started following the She Gone movement?
What's that?
The She Gone movement. Have you started following that?
Yeah, you know what? I get a kick out of I get a kick out of the videos, but what Twitter is, what baseball Twitter is in a lot of senses, it's no different than politics, where you have two people on complete opposite ends of the spectrum, and they're so stubborn in their own ways, to the point where you're never going to get one to believe the other, and where the truth is probably always in the middle. And it's good for entertainment, but when you start taking that stuff seriously, that's when the blood starts boiling.
So the bigger you get, the more hate you're gonna see.
Yeah.
I mean,
yeah.
Gary V, right? He says he's got empathy for those people, because something's wrong there when they're putting those negative comments on it, on posts. And
see, that's how we know we haven't made it yet with this podcast, because we're not getting a lot of hate.
That's the goal.
You know what? I honestly think a lot of people don't believe the shit that they put out there, but they put it out there just to create a reaction. It's the Howard Stern method of years ago, where he, a huge chunk of his listeners were openly against him, but they kept listening to see what he would say next. So like, if you create a reaction, then people are at least paying attention to you. And sometimes you got to put some crazy shit out there, like some of the most ridiculous drills that who knows if they even do anything,
right?
Just to create a reaction. And you're like, oh my God, like, is this guy serious? So who knows?
It's true. I follow Teacher Man, so
yeah. Darren, just real quick, give everybody the exact tag you are on Twitter.
Coach Your Kids.
At Coach Your Kids. Yeah. Okay, perfect. All right, so this is something I ask everybody in your position, and I think, I probably know the answer, but so when you're a recruiting coordinator at Rutgers and you're out there looking at players, and I think Darren Fenster, the minor league manager, probably is looking for the same attributes as Darren Fenster, the Rutgers recruiting coordinator, but what's your top couple things you were looking for in players and you want to see?
So similar in some ways and different in others. So obviously the first thing is talent. So I'll just put myself in, like, say you're sitting in the stands at a showcase, you're crossing off the guys who, just by watching them, that, talent wise, they aren't at the level that you want. So then, say you have 100 kids at a showcase and you're able to cross 60 kids off right off the bat, as soon as, like, you just see them going through whatever their the physical drills are at that time, and then you start watching them play. So say it's like a 3-day showcase or a tournament, and you're just watching them play, and you're watching the actions, you're watching body language, and you're trying to get a sense of, is this guy, is he a baseball player, or is he just someone who has some tools? Your classic 5 o'clock hitter who could put on a show during BP, but then all he is a hell hacker in a game. He's not a hitter. He's just a free swinger who's got some pop, who could hit the ball out of the ballpark against a BP pitcher, but against real pitching. So you're constantly, filtering people out, and it begins with talent, and then you start digging into, the makeup of a player and the game intelligence of a player. Because once you get into professional baseball, and so this is where it might change a little bit. So, when you're at Rutgers, you have to take the academic element in. So as I'm sitting, like the GPA and the SAT scores force you to eliminate some people, even though they may be good enough. But now, as you're getting into professional baseball, now your scale is not, all right, win now to try to win the Big East and get into a regional. Your scale is, what's this guy's potential to become a major leaguer? And so from a talent perspective, guys like me and you don't necessarily look as attractive in that scope to the highest level, even though like our baseball skills can allow us to help teams win games. Like there's a time when, everybody, the talent all evens out. And so the expression that I always like to use is like, you have 5% of the players in the minor leagues who are just better than everybody else. Like think the Bryce Harpers, the Mike Trouts, the Manny Ramirez's, Steven Strasburg's, like people like that who just talent-wise, they're just better than everybody else. And then you have the bottom 5% who have no business being in professional baseball, but got drafted because of a favor or whatever, and they weed themselves out. But then the 90% that's in that huge block in between, like they're relatively close talent-wise. So what are the things that separate one from the other? And that's all the stuff that you can't see, and you have to get to know in the sense of, what makes this guy tick? What's it, what motivates him? What's their work ethic? Is this kid coachable? Do they know the game? Like that's one thing that I always prided myself on as a player, and then prided myself on with the teams that I managed, was teaching the game from an intelligence standpoint where, if your talent level is here, but you play with some smarts, you actually play above your talent. But then you got guys whose talent level may be all the way up here, but they're dumbass on the field. Well, they fall back because they're making mistakes that their talent can't get them out of. So it's a constant evaluation of those things that when you're projecting a guy out, no different like whether you're recruiting or whether you're scouting, you're projecting a guy out not only based on what they can do on the field, but what you're trying to figure out what's inside of them, because that's what really is going to determine, whether or not they maximize that potential.
No, that's great. And how about with when you have kids coming in? We've had some good stories with Mike. Do you have any good family stories of just people coming into the office and you're like, what is this kid wearing? Or I can't believe they acted like this. Or even maybe a story of something outstanding, like off the top of your head.
The outstanding ones I probably can't talk about over the air, but every level of the game, high school, college, professional, like even within the professional ranks, A-ball, AA, AAA, every level has like some uniqueness to it. So I remember managing a rookie ball team, and you got kids who sign out of high school, and when they get in on day one, their locker is full of gear. You got 5 T-shirts, 2 sweatshirts, 3 pairs of shorts, sandals, whatever. And then, you see these kids coming in and out of the ballpark in full-on Red Sox gear. Like they're a walking billboard. And, it's a teaching moment, because like when you're in college, like you wear your stuff away from the ballpark. And then when you're a professional, like that's not something that guys do. So that's a teaching point. I remember, and then I had Yohan Moncada in 2015. And so background on him. So he was traded for Chris Sale and one of the most incredible athletes I've ever been around on the field. So he signed, I think, for $32 million, right? So now, if you don't know
at 16, was he like 16 when he signed for that?
No. He was he might have been 19 at the time. So like Cuba was like a different animal.
Oh,
but
Cuba,
like if you don't know the background of like just Cuban economics, you know, guys get paid like $10 a month. Like it's insane, like what people get paid there. So this kid, so like in his mind, like he had like his economic scale, like he had no idea how much money he had, right, at the very beginning. So like if he showed up late and I fined him like $25, just like I would fine anybody else late $25, like he wanted to kill me. It was like I was taking his entire inheritance. And then like that was like a, you know, a teaching point to him. And he's like, you know, because he thought because he signed for that much money, I was fining him that much money. But, you know, but like as he kind of, you know, he wasn't professionalized. Like his first professional experience was with us in Greenville in 2015. So as he kind of goes around, you know, he starts spending some money, and, you know, a couple of years later, he bought like a couple, you know, $100,000 cars. So he realized what he had. But I remember his birthday was either in like July or August, and we're in Augusta. And so this was before like the minor leagues like had like a bottom barrel standard of like hotel that you could stay at. So we were staying at like this motel in Augusta where they said, do not leave after you get back from the ballpark at night. And like some of the doors, like you could not lock. So he had like a necklace mailed to this hotel, right? And it was like a $25,000 necklace. And he had two of them, right? So the running joke in the league was when he stole, like you heard him because you heard the necklaces like just jingling as he was coming around. So, you know, we laughed about it. And then like, you know, a week later, he comes and he's like, hey, I can't play today. And we're like, well, what's going on? He's like, my back is killing me. Like, I just didn't get a good night's sleep. I'm like, well, you know, any reason? He's like, yeah, you know, my air mattress has a hole in it. And I'm like, dude, you just spent 25 grand on a necklace. What do you say you spend like maybe 24 grand on the necklace and actually invest in a mattress so you get a good night's sleep? So, you know, so it was just funny, the things that a lot of these guys that's on their radar that, you know, doesn't necessarily employ common sense, but, you know, I'm sure everyone on this podcast has done some stupid shit growing up, or, you know, even as we're older, we still do some stupid shit, but it's funny to look back on, and, you know, you tell stories like that.
He's made a name for himself now too.
He's turned himself into a good player.
Yeah. Did you see that back then? That was going to happen, or?
I mean, if I want to sound really smart, I could say yeah, but, you know,
he struggled a little bit, right?
He was raw. Like he's still to this day, he's the best athlete I've ever seen on a baseball field. Like athletically, he could do things that other people could not. But you know, he didn't really know the game, and he, you know, if you hit him 10 ground balls, he'd field them 10 different ways. So he needed the professionalism and the routines. And to his credit, you know, he put the work in, and he's finally gotten to the point where, you know, I think he hit over 300 last year, and he moved from second base to third base. So, you know, just like anything else, experience sometimes is the best teacher. Yeah,
definitely. So I know you were in Portland. How great is that place? I played there, and
it's great. Once you get to June, you know, growing up in the Northeast, I thought I knew all about cold weather, but I've never felt cold. We had heaters on in our dugout in June, you know, but like you earn summer there by going through April and May. But incredible place.
Yeah, I guess I got traded to the Red Sox in the middle of the summer, so I missed that part.
Yeah, because if you would have been there from the beginning, you definitely would remember that cold, because you are soft when it comes to the weather.
Yeah, I'm the biggest bitch brutal out there with the cold.
Beautiful, absolutely. Like there are days like where you don't do anything on the field. Like you just say, all right, guys, we're just going to hit inside, and we're going to go out, and we're going to hope that we have a 2.5 hour game and come back in. Like there were games where the first pitch was 37 degrees. at 6 o'clock at night. So, but that's the reality. And, if you could find a way to play under those conditions, it kind of makes you a little tougher. But
I found the fans were so
we are the way that we are, I think.
Yeah, no doubt. I found those fans to be pretty educated though back then. They were into it, and I really enjoyed having the hockey over there too.
The Bush family used to come to some of those games also back then.
Yeah, they did. They didn't come to some of that I was there, but the one guy who did come was Bill de Blasio, who's apparently like a huge Red Sox fan, and he's really good friends with the owner of the team, and the owner's seats are literally like you have dugout rail and then you have the owner's seats. So I spent half a game talking to Bill de Blasio about nothing political, but
he would be a Red Sox fan.
It was funny.
Yeah, right.
Seeing like some of the personalities that kind of come through, some of these places, like Dabo Sweeney would come to Greenville Drive games.
Oh, really?
So huge baseball fan. So yeah, it's interesting.
No, but Ro, I actually when I was
let me ask you this, because
no, go ahead.
Sandy, let me ask you this: now that we're all coaching, and Brian's on the analytical side of the game now, you hear about how much the game has changed, right? And as coaches, we do see certain aspects of the game's change, but I just coached Division I baseball this year. It's very similar to Division I baseball I played 15, 20 years ago. Now, where you are now to where we were 15, 20 years ago on the field, do you see a big difference? And obviously some velocity has gone up throughout the game, things like that. But what can you say, or is it very similar and you think that that's overblown?
I mean, there are ways you could say the game is exactly the same today as it was 20 years ago, as it was 50 years ago. The difference is the way that we look at it, the way that we evaluate it. And I truly believe that, from a foundational level, the things that teams did 20 years ago to win are the same things that you need to do today to win. And now this is where
now, is that a personal belief that you think needs to be applied more in the game, or is that what you think people in the game still believe that?
I think just like anything else, there's you have balance, and it's very much a personal belief. But I also think that you're foolish to not take advantage of information that's out there. So, analytics is a huge buzzword, right? But all analytics is information. And I remember as a player, Gaff, I don't know if you remember this, but you'd have pitchers who would chart games. They would sit and stand. So when you were in the Carolina League, you only had 7 other teams that you were playing. So you're playing the same teams over and over and over again. So I remember, when I was in the lineup, they had the chart would be posted for that night's starter on the board, and I would look at that just to get an idea of what to expect out of that pitcher, how they were going to work me, or what I had seen previously, and that is literally exactly what a heat map is. Now it's a heat map is drawn off of TrackMan, so it's probably a little bit more accurate than from 2 guys who are sitting in the stands, probably checking out, the hot chick that's sitting in the section over it. But, theoretically it was the same stuff. So, to say that you don't use analytics, like if you've ever used a scouting report, if you've ever looked at a pitcher's stat line to figure out what kind of a pitcher it is, you've done this before, and it just didn't have that name. But where guys get caught up in worrying about the wrong things, especially in this day and age, and I think social media has a lot to do with this, is the emphasis on exit velocity and launch angle and velocity, these are all physical attributes that guys are working towards. It doesn't, yes, they are important, but just because you have a physical skill doesn't mean that you can, have success in the game. So, I heard a guy by the name of CJ Gilman, who's the hitting coordinator for the Reds, like young, bright, knows all the technological.
He came from the college ranks too, right?
Yeah. He was at Air Force. And so I heard him speak, and he had just as simple as you can put it, like, he's like, all this stuff is great. All the tech is great. All the numbers are great. But at the end of the day, how are you using this stuff to be a productive baseball player that helps your team win. Because that, at the end of the day, that's what it's all about. You know, like if you have the perfect swing, but you can't make contact, does you no good. If you could throw a ball 98 miles an hour, but you can't throw it over the plate, it does you no good. You know, if you have all these tools that you can't use, that you can't translate into game-changing skills, well then, you know, you're kind of wasting your time. So there's a two-pronged part to development where what analytics gives us and what the tech gives us, it just, you know, for a guy like me, like tech is feedback. That's all it is. That's how our organization uses it, where it's feedback to make sure that we're going in the right direction. From the strategic standpoint, it's making sure that we're understanding ourselves as a player, like showing a hitter a heat map, knowing, hey, like, you know, when you go on pitches middle in, this is what your OPS is. When you swing at pitches that are low and away, this is what your contact rate, whatever it is. And it's reinforcing some things. It makes you aware of your strengths. It makes you aware of your weaknesses. It gives you a roadmap of what to work on. Because at the end of the day, like the job, you know, for a minor league, it's to develop championship big leaguers, and a championship is winning. So if you're not teaching guys how to use their physical tools as a means to like help your team win, then what's the point? You know, this isn't home run derby. You know, if it was, then all this stuff that a lot of these kids focus on is different. And so instead of chasing the numbers that come with exit velocity or, you know, miles an hour out of your hand, like you have to see where all that stuff fits into the big picture of being a complete baseball player.
I mean, that speaks to a lot of what I guess we're seeing right nowadays with kids also, unfortunately, maybe training to the metrics though, and not training how to be good baseball players. You know, you talked about earlier how, you know, when you would evaluate guys, you see the tools, you see the abilities, the talents are easy to kind of point out. Then all of a sudden you got to figure out who can actually play the game, right? And same goes for, I got to imagine, in the player dev side. Yeah, you know, most of these guys that are signed, they all have some type of elite tool. But the awareness and the acumen certainly isn't there. Or maybe it's lacking in comparison to the past because of the way kids are training as opposed to playing. Is there some type of correlation to it?
Yeah, no question about it. Like, you know, I always say that this generation that's coming into the college game and the pro game right now, it's by far the most talented generation that's ever played the game. You know, they're throwing harder than they ever have. You know, their swings are more polished than they've ever been. But, you know, along those same lines, you know, it's probably one of the least baseball smart generations as well, where they just don't know how to use this stuff. And a product of that is, you know, kids don't practice as much as they do as teams, like just learning the game. I think, you know, they spend so much time on, you know, developing as an individual player that is completely independent of, you know, where the individual player fits into the team part of the game. It's you know, the travel organizations that just go play in tournaments left and right and never, you know, spend a ton of time like actually practicing as a team. And the third part is probably like guys don't watch baseball as much as, you know, we did growing up. I mean, I'm 41 years old. So growing up, there were no cell phones. There was no internet. You know, we had Sega Genesis and Nintendo and, you know, the originals. And, you know, there was only so many video games you could play before you got sick of them. So the options for us to spend our free time were far more limited than what they are now. The baseball opportunities are far more limited. So what we did, like I watched so many games, like I get caught even today, you know, stuck at home. I get caught into the rabbit holes of watching like the 1986 NLCS that I remembered like watching as a kid, but now like I watch them now and like just in a completely different lens. And I'm like, wow, this was an unbelievable series. Like every single game was unbelievable. And so I remember distinctly as a kid watching so much baseball that I would see something in a major league game and then I would try it in my own game the very next day. Like, for instance, I told a story the other day, like they always talked about Cal Ripken, how he had awful range, but he always put himself in a position to not need to have range because he knew the hitter. So I remember like the very next day seeing that, I was like, oh, you know, I just started moving myself around. I had no idea what the hell I was doing or why I was doing it. But like I slowly learned, like from watching the game, you know, I think when you get like a view from 30,000 feet, it allows you to see something a little bit differently than when you're standing on the infield dirt with a specific job in hand with the game going on at that time.
And I think like what you just said, I think I'll speak for Jimmy, that like all the infielders coming up in our generation remember that Cal Ripken statement. And I think we all did that. And now, to your point, the kids, they don't hear that now, because now the coaches are shifting, and it's they don't take things, they're not accountable on their own to make these moves. And what they will take away is, for instance, a Josh Donaldson going on MLB Network and saying any coach that tells you to hit the ball low and hard is wrong.
Yeah.
You know? So so as a coach now,
that set back youth baseball like 10 years.
but it's funny that you use that Cal Ripken statement, because that's something that I remember hearing the same thing, and I was like, oh, I'm going to move a righty's up. He's probably going to pull it. I'm going to move over, where you never thought of it before as a kid.
Yeah.
Like we were developing, at a young age with the mental side of things.
Yeah. And I'm sure, like, when we were coming up, coaches bitched about something that we didn't do, and, a byproduct of, oh, these kids have all these video games, what the hell are they doing? We were reading or whatever. But so what this, it doesn't do you any good to complain about it. And all it is like you realize that there's a blind spot, that something that probably didn't have to be coached nearly as much 10 years ago. It's something that we have to find creative ways to figure out, how to get these guys to be smart when they're on the field, to kind of make their talent play a little bit higher than what it would be if they don't use their heads when they're playing.
Right. I want to get into your new role, which I guess you did it last year, right? You were the roving guy last year. I don't think the people that listen understand what it is to be a coordinator, and the responsibility and the travel. And, as opposed to being that manager where you're part of the team, you're kind of in your city half the time, and you do travel a lot. But let's talk about that coordinator role and how difficult that is. And obviously they think highly of you to put you in it, but what are your thoughts on it?
It's funny how I got the role in the first place. So at the end of the 2018 season, we had some turnover within our organization. Our AAA manager left for a role with the Mets. Our field coordinator left for a role with the Cubs. So our outfield and base running coordinator, he became our AAA manager. So we had our field coordinator open, and we had our outfield and base running coordinator open. And they asked me to interview for the field coordinator job. So like, that's something that I've always loved the idea of. Like, that's a culture job, and I love culture, and I love, how you're able to develop something. And like, I became fascinated with it, just as a manager, when you're around guys for 6-7 months at a time, how you're able to build something. And so the idea of being a field coordinator where, you could do that not with 25 guys, but with an entire minor league organization, is incredibly intriguing to me. And it's like, one of what you would call like an end, short of the big leagues, it's an end game type goal position. And so like, I was really pumped that I had the opportunity to interview for it. At the end of the day, didn't get it. They wanted bringing in somebody from the outside, and in the process of them telling me, they're like, hey, you check so many of the boxes, and like, really, there's nothing that we could say why you're not qualified for this job. You are, but we just really wanted someone who could give us a different perspective with the way that they see what we do. And I'm okay, but we still want to get you into a leadership position. And so I'm thinking that they're just telling me all this stuff to kind of ease the blow of telling me that I didn't get the job. And then my boss stops, and he's like, you don't know where I'm going with this, do you? He's like,
you thought you were getting sent back to Wilmington, didn't you?
I'm like, no, I have no idea. Where are you going? He's like, well, we'd actually like to offer you the outfield and base running job. And so I think I was silent for about 10 seconds. And then, because like, you want to talk about like, not even on my radar. I think the first thing I said to him was, you do know I'm an infield guy, right? And so, he's like, yeah, but you do know that you played 8 games of error-free baseball as a left fielder in 2004. So that qualifies you as an expert outfield instructor. And then, we laughed, and he's like, you've been in the organization for 7 years. We know how you dive into things. So we know that even though this isn't necessarily an area of expertise, if you were to take it on, you're going to dive into it the way that you dive into everything else. And, I'm happy that he was able to see that I would be able to do that, because that's exactly what wound up happening, and it allowed me to, become a lot more knowledgeable in an area that I knew the basics, but didn't know the details of the base running stuff I've always loved. So that was a natural fit. And so what, going back to the cultural thing, so what this role allows me to do is, instead of having like a culture within like the Greenville Drive or the Portland Sea Dogs, now it's, hey, what are we going to be all about as an organization when it comes to running the bases? What are we going to be all about when it comes to like being outfielders? Where you get to the point where you want any affiliate, when they say, man, you go up and down the Red Sox minor leagues, that every single affiliate's going to run their asses off on the bases. And in the outfield, they're going to throw the ball to the right base. They're going to back up positions. They're going to, play with reckless abandon. Like, that was what was appealing, to be able to have like a macro impact on the whole organization, from AAA all the way down to our Dominican Academy, to all sync up with what they're doing at the major league level, relative to being a boot on the ground. So, it's a role that I really enjoy. And, you basically see 3 or 4 games with each affiliate each month. You're based out of home, and you get 8 to 10 days off a month, which is pretty nice. But everybody asks me, he's like, do you miss managing? Which do you like more? And I can't say, like, I absolutely miss managing because I love it. But this is a different way to impact the organization on, I think, a grander scale.
You know what? I actually heard you speak a little bit about the importance of base running, and you do, I think, a really good job explaining why there's so much value in being prepared and understanding how to run the bases, because ultimately being able to cross that plate is the end game, right? You got to score a run, right? You got to score a few runs to win a game, right? So, you got but so many opportunities out there, and, it gets lost in, I guess, where people think there's not a whole lot of value in understanding what it means to be a good base runner, So can you touch on that briefly? Like, some of the things that are important to you as a guy who's the coordinator, and, what makes a good base runner? Is it being fast? I think if we, most people think that's the assumption, but I think if you're in the game for a long time, that's not necessarily true. So share with us some of your thoughts, like, what can qualify someone as a good base runner?
Yeah. So this was interesting, just to get the perspective of the player, what they thought about base running as soon as I got this job, because spring training in 2019 was my first in the role where, on day one, I have players who I haven't seen, since the previous season, guys coming up to me left and right. Hey, Fenny, I got to get more bags this year. I had, 10 last year. I want to get 30 this year. I had 20 last year. I want to get 50, whatever it was. So the only thing that these guys associated base running with was base stealing. That was it, because it's the only stat really that is a base running stat. And so, as I kind of alluded to before, the whole job of the minor leagues is to develop major leaguers. And what guys don't realize is that the stolen base in the major leagues is a dying skill. So the days of like a Vince Coleman or a Billy Hamilton or Ricky Henderson stealing 100 bases in a year, those days are long gone. Like last year, there were 6 players in all of Major League Baseball that had more than 30 stolen bases. So like even 30, like it might sound like a big number, but in the major leagues, it's like a little more than 1 a week. So it really isn't a lot. So base stealing just isn't as huge a part of the game. So like we're not going to spend a ton of time learning how to steal bases if they're never going to use it in the major leagues. Now, that doesn't say that, hey, if you have a guy that can do that, we're not going to emphasize that. But, speaking in general terms in the way that we're going to develop base runners, very rarely are you ever going to have a guy in your minor league system that's going to be an impact base stealer at the major leagues. So then what do you do if you're the base running guy? So if very few guys will be base stealers, every single hitter is going to be a base runner. And so, it takes, what speed allows you to do is it allows you to outrun mistakes. It allows you to outrun bad technique. But if you have plus speed and then you have an attention to detail and you have technique, then that puts you at a level of being an elite base runner that can make a difference, completely independent of stolen bases. So the things that we talk about are things that you learn in Little League baseball camp, like what part of the base to touch. We practice it, how to turn going around first to be efficient. We talk about like timing out your secondary lead. We talk about learning how to read outfielders when they may not be in a great position to throw you out, even though they might not be that deep. So we talk about all these things that we're making players aware of, that if they can do them, they're opening up potential windows to beat a force at second base if they get a great jump off their secondary lead, or to go first and third because they realize the center fielder is going away from the play. So when we get into that mindset of a detailed mindset, then now you're enabling an average runner, even a below average runner, to make a difference on the bases that, it's not going to be stolen base per se, but like they may be able to get a dirt ball read because they learn how to anticipate, or they beat out, they get a hustle double on a ball down the line because they had an efficient turn. So like little things like that every single player can do that has nothing to do with speed allows them to at least be able to do something on the bases, even though they might not be able to steal a ton of bags.
And Darren, so I was an outfielder, and I find it at times in a practice scenario, it's kind of challenging to, all right, what are we going to work on? For me, it was more, if I could take 100 fly balls a day, that got me better. And it was taking batting practice and working, every pitch off the bat, and really just being in game, just being into every pitch. That's how, like, if I'm going to tell a young player, if you want to be a good outfielder, it's paying attention, it's being into every pitch, being ready. What are things that you're telling guys or working with guys on?
On the outfield side, we have three, I guess you call them 3 buckets of drills. So we have like an early work bucket, which is completely foundational and like technique based. It's focusing on 1 or 2 things that is just developing the skill, like no different than like hand rolls on the infield side, like how to get your feet to work together, like glove angle, all the stuff that, a huge part of what we do on the outfield is a byproduct of how I learned how to, break down the infield side of things. So that's one part that we'll do like as an early work routine where you guys don't even have to be loose to do it. And then we have what I would call like short drills where now there may be some breaks involved. There may be some technique on fly balls and going back on a ball and like learning how to turn your head or learning how to turn your hips or things like that. And then we have what are called, what I would call like long drills where, you're on a foul line or you're at home plate and guys are deep out in the outfield and, we're skying the ball, like balls off the bat. We're using machine, whatever it is, we're doing communication, all those things. So, one thing that I realize now as the outfield guy, like I used to always think like, all out, there's not a ton of stuff that you could do for outfielders drill wise. Like infielders, like you could run a 6-hour camp 5 days a week and never repeat the same drill twice. There's just so much to do. As I dove into this stuff on the outfield, I realized, if you're creative, you could figure out all kinds of things to do on the outfield side that, keeps guys engaged and keeps them getting better. But to your point, the one thing that we do tell every single outfielder, the most important part of their day is during batting practice, because that is that's as close to a game rep as they will ever get, where they can practice their pre-pitch timing, their reads, their breaks, their routes, and there is no drill, there's no fungo that can replicate that. So, that's where they take ownership of whatever they're going to be as outfielders. Like we put it on them. And Jackie Bradley Jr. is like the epitome of what that looks like when you start doing it at 12 years old. Like there were times when he was coming up through the minor league system where we had to tell him to stop during batting practice because like he'd bolt across and rob a home run in left center field. And then the very next pitch, you see him darting all the way into right center field, making the diving catch. Like he loves it, and like if he kept doing that for, 140 days, by, June 1st, he wouldn't be able to walk. So, that's the approach. And like, you look at the way that he plays the outfield now, like he will tell you he's as good as he is, not because of any drills, but because of the way that he works during batting practice. And some guys need a kick in the ass to get in that mindset of doing it all the time. But once they do, I think they realize the benefit as those routes and those reads get a little bit easier as time goes on during the game.
No, definitely. And what are you guys teaching in terms of crow hopping? Because I know there's a couple different theories or ways of doing it. I mean, do you kind of let the individual athlete kind of decide what he's most comfortable with?
I don't have, you hear the term crow hop, you hear the term pro step, whatever it is. I don't call it anything. The thing that I explain to our guys is, like, I want them to think about going out with their feet instead of up. And so that takes care of everything, because if they're going out with their feet, if they're gaining ground, then they're getting momentum into their throw. If you're going straight up, you can't really do anything until you come down. So it's just, they're a lot more efficient. They're a lot quicker with their feet. And that is 100% also, relative to the infield stuff. Like, if we're teaching, there's drills that we'll do in the outfield that are identical to what we would be doing on the infield. And the only difference is, we got to get our feet going a little bit more aggressively because we have a little bit of a longer throw.
Yeah, no, that's awesome. And actually, when I was with the Red Sox, it was more, they were teaching up, that traditional crow hop. With the Dodgers, it was catch, take one step. So you were gaining ground throughout.
Yeah.
It just felt like it just put you in a stronger position as you're gaining ground.
Yeah, I think it's like, it's like the debate of, do you put your glove foot forward? Do you put your arm foot forward? And, like, honestly, I don't care. Like, whichever way you could be most efficient with your footwork to get off a quick and accurate throw, do that. So we literally have, like, if you could do both, great, because sometimes the ball dictates that one way may be a little bit better than the other. But we give guys the athletic flexibility to not, say, hey, you have to do it this way. If they're really quick and really efficient, doing it, in the non-traditional way, I guess is what you would call it.
Mm-hmm.
So Darren, 2020, are you going to get on a field? If they have this thing where they're going to send the guys down to the minor league complex, I guess you would be down there, right?
Who knows? I mean, I could run over to Lincroft Little League right now and get on a field. So
right.
I don't know if that's what you're referring to. So can I do that? Yeah. I don't know. I don't know if that'll be good. If there's like some creepy old guy who just happens to be on a Little League field.
Yep. No, you fit right in.
Yeah. But, I'm optimistic. They're going to figure out all the big league stuff first, and hopefully that gets resolved, as ugly as it may be right now. Once that gets settled, then, I'm sure the minor league side will, we'll have a conversation about that, and, what that's going to look like, who knows? I mean, you guys, I'm sure, are familiar with, all the protocols they're talking about just to get the major league season going from a medical standpoint. So, I don't know how realistic it is to scale that into, whatever it is, 10, 12, 14 minor leagues to do the same sort of thing.
Yeah.
But I do believe that, as the country gets healthier, as we return to some sort of normalcy, and hopefully there's, Major League Baseball, that at some point, on the minor league side, we will get together in some way, shape, or form. And whether that's, a glorified instructional league, or, an extended spring training towards the end of the summer, where, I think we're going to do everything possible that our players on the minor league side don't have like a complete washed out, 2020.
Yeah. Got to make sure they're still developing.
Yeah. So, we're doing what we can right now remotely, and every kid has, a different circumstance with what they have access to. But, I think if we're able to get together for a month or two before the fall or winter, hopefully we could get something out of the year.
So I hate to put a damper on the conversation, but
you really? And if anybody knows Jimmy, he doesn't hate putting a damper.
No, it's we always do our call up story here, and obviously you're in our group of never been called up to the big leagues, so we want your release story, the day that it all ended for you, if you can share with us.
Oh man! Wait, can I lead? Let me do a little intro to that, Darren.
Yeah,
because
I would love it.
Yeah. Well, because like Darren obviously has coming into his own in his coaching career. He's very well respected, has a great following for all the right reasons. But people don't talk about how good of a player he was. He was All-American at Rutgers, gets drafted, hits adversity, gets through it, gets big league invite. And I remember the day where Darren, I think you tore your ACL, was it Darren?
Yeah.
Yeah. Fenny, I remember
In
like
big league camp, right?
in big league camp,
Yeah.
the mood in the minor league locker room with our little crew we had, it was like, I mean, it was like a wake, you know, like Fenny did what? What happened to Fenny? Like we were heartbroken. And I think it was you remember Damaso Espino might have been the guy who broke the news to me, and it was heartbreaking. So I'm not making excuses.
Well, he wasn't really released. He got hurt.
Darren, but you spent the whole year.
Oh no, I got released.
No.
Oh, did you?
Yeah.
No, you have to get released.
Yeah, you spent the whole year rehabbing. So there you go. There's your intro.
Yeah.
All right,
So
fine, Gaff. Fine.
So okay, so go to big league camp, get hurt in big league camp, so blow out my ACL, miss the whole year. I live in Arizona rehabbing the whole time.
Surprise.
So at no point did I think it was going to be the end of my career. I'm like, all right, just another bump in the road, just like anything else. So I remember we went back.
You feel like you're in the mix now too, right? Like you were.
Yeah. Like you know, you go to big league camp. Like I feel like until you are around those guys every day that you've been watching on TV, until you see that, you know, you actually can play on the same field as them, like that's the first time you really believe that like you belong. And that's what being in major league camp did for me. So fast forward to, so I got hurt in 05, fast forward to spring training in 06. So I got hurt March 23rd. I had surgery April 20th. So February 15th, I'm back in camp. So this is 10 months out of surgery, medically cleared, but like definitely not what I was before in terms of just, you know, physical athletic ability. Like I felt slow, like I had days where my, you know, my knee was barking or whatever, but like nothing serious, like nothing different than anybody else who had kind of come back from surgery. So I was constantly getting treatment. And like I had a terrible camp. You know, I just distinctly remember like, you know, not performing and, you know, like still kind of just finding my way back. And, you know, as camp started to progress, and we all start playing GM, I'm like, well, shoot, I don't know if I'm going to make a team. You know, we're not in Wilmington anymore, so I can't go back to Wilmington. So what I thought was going to happen, because I was in such high standing with the organization the year prior, having been a non-roster invite to big league camp, I thought that I was going to be held back and extended, you know, let me get back to the level that I was at previously, whether that took, you know, a week, a month, whatever it was, just they would give me that opportunity. So, you know, every minor league has their cut day, and it's, you know, now in this role, it's the worst day of the year. It absolutely sucks.
We just had that happen the other day, huh?
Yeah. I mean, usually what happened the other day usually happens at, you know, the last couple of days of spring training. So the way, Gaff, I don't know if you remember this, the way that we would do it with Kansas City was,
I remember it.
You know, so you had all the coaches kind of roaming around like the Grim Reaper, right? You know,
you
probably
can see it on their face.
four or five of them, right? So I get to the clubhouse and like, you know, I don't know if I was nervous, but like I might have like wondered, you know, I didn't think it was going to happen. And I probably should have had this conversation before just to have a feeling for it, but I didn't. And I walk by one, you know, look at him, say hello. He doesn't say anything. I walk by another. So I walk by three of them and I'm like, oh, you know, I guess I'm good. So I get to my locker and I start changing. And then Jeff Garber, who was our field coordinator at the time, I had played for him in Wilmington, and then he had gotten promoted, and I was really, really close to him. And he grabbed me, and I was like, "Oh shit!" So he tells me the news that I was getting released, and you know, I was pissed, you know, because I had busted my ass to rehab back to good health. And I remember Carlos Fabulous, who had been in the big leagues. We both had the same injury. Mine was 2 months after his, and you know, I work with him now with the Red Sox, and I bust his balls because, like, you know, he was so lazy with his rehab, and you know, he wasn't even medically cleared by the end of spring training. And I was like, man, I should have just, you know, half-assed it so I could still be hurt, you know, but that wasn't what I was all about or whatever. So I go up in the have the meeting with the farm director at the time, and he tells me, like, I'm like, I'm surprised. I'm like, how do I go from being in, getting hurt in Major League camp and, doing this? He's like, well, what are you going to do now? I'm like, I don't know. Like, I said something like, fix all the, maybe get a job in baseball and fix all the bullshit like this. Right. So I say this to the farm director, right? And I'm like, I was like pleading my case about how, like, I couldn't understand how I was in such high standing. I got hurt and I'm not, granted I had a bad camp, but like, how do you not have a spot for me to at least have the opportunity to get back to full speed during extended? Right. So I go back to, my, the hotel at the time, and the farm director called me up and he was all pissed off. He's like, I don't understand why, I really don't appreciate everything that you had said. And, he was all fired up. I'm like, dude, like, you just completely blindsided me of, like, going from, like, Moonlight Graham, or, like, you poured the cup of coffee, the proverbial cup of coffee, you put it right in front of my face, and then you spilt it all over me, and so what he wound up saying at the end of that conversation, like, he said his piece and I said mine. He's like, you know what? Like, if you would like to stay down and extended, we'll do that for you. And, like, I was shocked. Like, I'm like, did I really just talk myself out of my own release?
That
Like,
never happens.
This has ever happened before, right? And so I was so pissed off. I'm like, I'll let you know tomorrow. And then, like, like, I should have been thankful that they had given me that opportunity. But, as I thought about it, I realized, I'm like, you know what? Like, they showed where I stood at that point. And I didn't want to be the guy who was staying in extended, waiting for somebody to get hurt so that I could get an opportunity. And, like, this was probably a huge black mark on on my name within the organization, from, which sucks after 5 years of basically doing whatever, whatever I'd been asked. So I said, you know what, like, I'm just gonna take my release. And, I went home bitter. And, I hindsight 2020, I should have tried to latch on with somebody else, or played, for the Somerset Patriots just down the road from where I lived. And, like so many guys whose careers don't work out the way that they want to, I was too pissed off to continue to play. And once you stop playing, you don't start playing again. But, with some perspective now, 2 weeks after I had gotten released, Coach Hill at Rutgers presented me with the opportunity to join his staff. He created a position for me. And, that was the start of this second life in the game. And, who knows how things would have worked out. Had I stayed in extended, had I, tried to play independent ball, maybe that opportunity to start coaching would have never been there. So, for as tough as that time was, in that moment, I'm thankful for it now, because, who knows if I would be where I am today had that not happened.
No, that's the exact way you got to look at it. And, but what about as the AA manager? Did you send anybody to the big leagues? The first call?
Never had the chance to send a guy to the big leagues. But I think even, promoting a guy from A ball to AA, from AA to AAA, when it is truly, when it's not like a filler, when a guy is truly getting promoted, I think there's a lot of enjoyment in that side of it, because it's like, all right, you've checked this box. Now you're ready for the next challenge. And sometimes guys are so caught off guard that, they react in a way that's probably very similar to how they would react, in getting caught up to the big leagues. And, those are the fun days. And, like I had said earlier, like, releasing a guy is the absolute worst. And, but unfortunately there's only so many spots, and, how many guys truly get to end their career when they want to. So,
right.
You take the good with the bad sometimes.
Darren, before we let you go, I kind of wanted to maybe have you leave a message out for, because, the point of us doing this podcast was kind of have some type of outreach to our travel organization, and obviously to the local people in the area who maybe follow us, and, even maybe at the collegiate level. But you've positioned yourself now over time, right, to be a caretaker of the game, right? Essentially, you're out there teaching, your knowledge and passing it on to the next guy, and you're doing it in a role, as you explained earlier, where you're teaching a position that you didn't quite necessarily grow up playing, but you have an awareness of, you have some background in, either through some utility time or just diving in and learning about it, right? But that requires some type of mindset in which you have to be a student of the game to be able to take in that information and to develop the information that you currently have, right? So how important is it for young athletes to really be locked in and paying attention, and especially in an era where it's, like say maybe high school or college, where it's tough for guys to maybe sit the bench because, everybody wants to play, but there's so much that you can learn when you're on that bench. Because I can reflect back to my first 2 years in college, being pissed off every day, never being in the lineup. But by the time I was a junior, when I was playing, I was a little prepared because I actually paid attention and listened. So like, what message can you, I guess maybe drive that home with for our audience?
I think for anything that you're going to do in the game, or even like, on a bigger picture, when it comes to like just something that you choose to pursue in life, I think you have a far greater chance at success if you love what you're doing. And so what I could tell people is, you talk about constantly being a student of the game. Well, everything that I've been able to do in the game as a player, as a coach, and, to what I'm doing now is a byproduct of just, a love affair with the game that started in my backyard, where, I truly, I couldn't get enough of it. It never really feels like work. It never really feels like a job in the sense of what a job may be. Now, this is in every way a career. But one thing that I've realized over the years, having, I guess this is 14 years of coaching at this point. I mean, it feels like it was yesterday that I was, yelling at our farm director about getting released. But the best players that I've ever been around, the majority of them love the game. They absolutely love the game. And when they have that love, and part of this goes into the coaching side, where you're creating an environment that's fun, where these guys just love being on the field. They have a love for their craft. They have a love for getting better. And so when they have that as their foundation, now all of a sudden there's more energy in a drill. There's more focus in whatever the hell it is that you're doing that day. They have a positive attitude, so that like, even, when they suck, there's still like that foundation of love that the next day they're able to come back and continue to put the work in. And so when you have that attitude that is built from the love, then, you can't help but get better because you're taking advantage of your days. So whether you're a bench player, whether you're a star, I think that regardless of what your role is, you need to find parts of your day that you absolutely love. So one thing that I learned how to do really well, and, Gaff and, all you guys could probably, identify with this, was when you're not playing every day, you can take the road of being pissed off about not playing, or you could turn batting practice and your pregame infield into your game for the day.
Love it.
And like, and that's something that we always talk about, where, when you're in the lineup, BP is about getting ready for the game. But when you're not in the lineup, and, very rarely are we putting our bench guys in, then you could kind of take that opportunity to go a little bit harder during BP, to work on your defense, to expose yourself to a different position, whatever, to take advantage of that day, even though you're not in the lineup that day. And it's something that's a lot easier said than done. I mean, shoot, I remember days in Burlington when I was a backup, and I was pissed off on some days that I was playing because the only reason I was playing was because the weather was bad and it was a save the prospect day.
I know about those days.
I remember those
so like I could say this, but I do remember what it was like to be in those shoes of, damned if you do and damned if you don't. You're always pissed off. So I think, you kind of manipulate your mind to figure out a way, regardless of whatever your situation was, to find a way to take advantage of that day. And that, I learned, is a lot easier to do when you're in a fun environment. And that's where a coach comes in, where if you're doing the same shit every day for 140 days, by day 5, everybody's sick of it. But if you're taking the time to be creative and you take time to, work with your players, and they know that, you're actually trying to get them better. And that was one thing that, I absolutely loved about a guy like Jeff Garber. It didn't care if you were a first-round draft pick or if you were a non-drafted free agent who signed for $1,000. He treated you like you were the organization's best prospect. And not every coach was like that. So, I think there are a lot of different elements to it. But if you're kind of, your team takes on the personality of the coach. So if you're a guy that has a ton of energy and you love the game, like that can't help but, seed into your players. And the opposite of that is true. If you're a lurch and you're, Debbie Downer and you're always negative and, low motor, well then, don't be surprised when your team is the same way. So that's something I've always been very conscious about. And I truly believe it is a way that you can kind of impact those guys, future big leaguers or, future coaches like us.
That's awesome. There's 2 things that you said there that I absolutely love. The first one was making those days when you're not playing your game day. And I think at the amateur level, that's a tremendous message, because you never know if, because of how you're going about that day, you might actually open up an opportunity for yourself, because if the coach is paying attention and he sees you kind of getting after it, you might take that into account the next time around, I guess on the other side of that, if you're kind of dogging it and if you're just being, like you said, a Debbie Downer about it, then you're going to get pushed further down that line, so that's one. And the other thing I love that you said was, the teams take on the personality of their coaches. So Jim, clean up your act over there with the, half empty glass you got.
Well, what I like, he said, and it's our number one thing when we recruit at New York Tech is I want baseball junkies. That's all I say, because those guys are different players every year. They are better every single year because they're cage rats or whatnot, and they listen to you and they're into the game and they love playing. So that's great.
And just to add on that one more thing, like similar to what Chris said, I know all of us and all of us have coached at some point and coaching now. There's more guys that put themselves further in the doghouse with how they go about their business. They get grumpy and they get all pissed off and they're negative. All right. Then guys who realize, hey, I'm going to make this a game, I'm going to be positive, and get themselves in the lineup. I think that's something that, especially at the college level right now, is a huge, huge issue. The attitude of, oh, I'm not playing, then I'm just mailing it in. And I think that's something that more these guys, I mean, I say it every day, like the way you handle failure tells me if you can handle the game. So that goes a long way.
Yep. And Ro, the captain of our team, called me today. Did he call you? No, I don't think so. He called me, wanted to fill me in on some things. So I think I'm doing a good job. But
you are the man. You're the man.
But Darren, you're the best, man. I mean, we're probably going to bother you again in the future if we keep doing this.
Yeah, that's fine. That's fine.
Yeah, because you're awesome. I follow you on the Twitter, and I think it's all great info. And I'm a real, not that I know everything, but I'm a pain in the ass, and I love everything you say. So that must mean you're awesome. So.
I am awesome, Jim. Thank you.
But Ro, wrap us up here, and so we can let this guy go to do nothing in his house.
Sounds good, man. Hey, Darren, thanks a lot. We really do appreciate you. And to our audience out there, thanks for tuning in. Please make sure to go to iTunes, Podbean, Spotify, hit the subscribe button. Don't be afraid to leave us a comment. You can also go to YouTube and hit the subscribe button there. Give us a like. And until next time, Wild Pitch Podcast.